Humans have always looked up the night sky and wondered what lies beyond. Stars, planets, and the endless darkness of space have fascinated everyone since the beginning of time. For centuries, people dreamed of reaching the stars, imagining what it would be like to walk on distant planets or travel among galaxies. It was the ultimate frontier, a place where humanity could test its courage, curiosity, and ambition. Yet, despite all the technology, knowledge, and determination, there was one region of space that seemed untouchable. Scientists called it forbidden space, but few understood why it was so dangerous, or why even the cosmos seemed to remember what humans had done before. The story begins with a researcher, someone who had spent years studying old space, missions and archives that most people had forgotten. This researcher was curious, careful, and extremely intelligent. Unlike others who worked with rockets, satellites, or space stations, this person was more interested in patterns, history, and secrets that governments and space agencies had tried to hide. While most of the world celebrated every new launch, as progress, this researcher noticed something strange. There were gaps in the data, missing reports, and strange accidents that nobody could explain. Ships had vanished without a trace, instruments had failed for no reason, and some astronauts had returned from missions, unable to explain what they had seen. The researcher spent months digging through old files, connecting dots that no one else had noticed. Some documents were classified, others almost destroyed, but eventually enough evidence emerged to form a disturbing picture. Humanity had tried to explore certain areas of space before, long before the new generation of rockets and probes. And every time they had tried, the results had been catastrophic. Entire crews were lost, and sometimes ships returned damaged in ways that no technology could repair. These events were labeled as accidents or technical failures in public records. But the researcher understood the truth. There was something in that part of the universe that actively resisted human intrusion, something that seemed to remember humanity's attempts and punish them. Even stranger were the reports from the few astronauts who survived. They described visions, strange sounds, and sensations that science could not explain. Some spoke of seeing impossible structures floating in the darkness, shapes that could not exist according to the laws of physics. Others felt a presence, as if something intelligent was aware of them, watching their every move. Some of these experiences had left survivors with permanent psychological effects, a fear that could never be erased. And yet, no one fully understood the phenomenon because the truth had been buried. The researcher realized that humanity's curiosity had brought it close to something powerful, ancient, and beyond comprehension, a force that seemed to remember. Every step humans had taken in that forbidden space, this part of the universe had always been shrouded in mystery. Even the most advanced telescopes could not fully penetrate the darkness. Space agencies had mapped nearby stars and planets, but beyond a certain point, their instruments recorded only anomalies, fluctuations in light, sudden bursts of energy, and signals that seemed intentional, almost like messages. Many dismissed these readings as natural phenomena, cosmic radiation, or glitches, but the researcher believed otherwise. To them, these were not accidents. They were warnings. The cosmos itself seemed to be speaking, reminding humanity that some places were not meant to be touched. The researcher was not the only one noticing these patterns. Small groups of scientists, engineers, and historians had begun to piece together the same story, though they were careful to keep their findings secret. They had no intention of panicking the public or stopping progress entirely. Humanity had always been an explorer, after all, but they also knew that curiosity without caution could be deadly. The forbidden region of space was a silent threat, a boundary that once crossed could bring consequences humanity was not ready to face. The story also looked back at humanity's first attempts to reach this part of space. Decades earlier, there had been missions launched with hope, ambition, and the promise of discovery. Ships had traveled far beyond the solar system, carrying crews filled with excitement and determination. But something went wrong. In each case, instruments began failing in ways no engineer could explain. Communications cut out abruptly. Entire ships disappeared from tracking systems. Those who returned often spoke of strange visions light that moved without reason, landscapes that seemed alive, and a sense of being observed by something vast and eternal. Governments quickly covered up these incidents. Reports were altered. Crew experiences were labeled as hallucinations, and files were sealed. The world continued to believe that space exploration was safe and controlled, that technology and training could overcome any challenge. Few knew the truth. Some regions of space were alive with memory, and this memory did not forgive mistakes. Even with modern technology, humans could not escape the consequences of curiosity unchecked. The researcher often imagined what it must have been like for those early explorers to leave Earth, the home of everything familiar, and venture into the unknown, to see sights that no human eyes had ever witnessed, to feel a presence in the darkness, something that was neither alive nor dead, but aware. There must have been moments of wonder, fear, and awe, all at once. But there was also loss, grief, and silence, the kind of silence that could stretch across light years and leave a permanent mark on the soul. While digging through historical archives, the researcher came across one particular set of logs that stood out. They were old, written in careful handwriting, describing a mission that had vanished without a trace. The crew had noted unusual energy readings, structures floating in the void, and messages that seemed to enter their minds directly. The logs described how some crew members had refused to believe at first, insisting that their instruments were failing, that it was just a trick of the mind. But as time passed, it became impossible to ignore. Something was out there, waiting, aware, and remembering humanity's every attempt to cross into forbidden space. It became clear to the researcher that this story was not just about exploration. It was about respect, humility, and the limits of human understanding. Humanity had grown confident, thinking that with enough knowledge, technology, and courage, nothing was impossible. But space was older than humans, larger than humans, and, perhaps in ways that could not be explained, conscious. The forbidden zone was not a random danger. It was a boundary, a test, or even a warning, a memory of humanity's repeated attempts and failures. The researcher also noted an important detail. The further humanity pushed, the stronger the resistance seemed to be. Ships that approached. The region experienced strange gravitational anomalies. Instruments overheated or produced impossible readings. Astronauts felt disoriented, even physically affected by forces that should not exist. These were not accidents or coincidences. The cosmos itself seemed to have a memory, a record of human actions, and a will to protect certain places from intrusion. By the end of the first part of the researcher's investigation, it was clear that humanity was standing at a crossroads. Space offered opportunity, wonder, and the chance to expand civilization. But it also demanded caution, respect, and understanding. The Forbidden region was more than a line on a map. It was a message from the universe. The cosmos remembered. It remembered every attempt, every ship lost, every astronaut who had dared to enter. And it was waiting, patient and eternal, to remind humanity that some frontiers were not meant to be crossed lightly. As the researcher closed the archives for the night, staring up at the stars through a small window in the lab, a sense of awe mixed with unease filled the room. The stars had always been a symbol of hope, but now they seemed like silent sentinels, watching humanity's every move. Somewhere out there, in the darkness beyond the solar system, a memory waited. And one day, humans would have to decide whether curiosity was worth the cost. or whether some mysteries were best left untouched. The night ended with that thought lingering in the air. Humans had reached for the stars for centuries, yet the universe still had secrets that no technology could unravel. It was a story of ambition, caution, and the quiet warning that even in the endless expanse of space, humanity was not truly alone, and the cosmos had not forgotten. After months of studying the old missions, the researcher began to see a clear pattern in the failures. It wasn't just random accidents or poor planning. Each mission that approached the forbidden region of space experienced a similar chain of events. Instruments would start to fail without explanation. Communications would drop suddenly. And in some cases, crews reported seeing things that should have been impossible. These were not hallucinations. They were experiences that left marks on both the mind and body of anyone who survived. The researcher realized that these records contained warnings humanity had ignored. The danger wasn't only technical or physical. It was also psychological. Astronauts reported feelings of being watched, whispers echoing in their minds, and visions of structures floating in the void. Some even claimed to see their own memories, twisted and rearranged as if the cosmos itself was replaying their thoughts back at them. Most of these reports were dismissed by the public or covered up by authorities, but in the researchers' eyes, they were proof that space was more than empty darkness. It was alive in ways humans could not fully understand. It became clear that the so-called forbidden space wasn't marked by visible signs or a simple map boundary. It was invisible, yet powerful, and it seemed to respond to human curiosity. The further a mission attempted to go, the stronger the effects became. Some ships experienced violent electromagnetic storms. Others were pulled by strange gravitational forces that no calculations could predict. Crews lost hours or even days without realizing it, sometimes coming back with physical and mental changes they could not explain. This phenomenon suggested that the universe remembered every intrusion, every attempt to explore, and perhaps even every thought of the explorers. As the researcher dug deeper, they uncovered a pattern in the timing of these failed missions. Many had occurred during periods when governments were trying to showcase space as a symbol of human achievement. Public pressure and ambition often forced astronauts into dangerous experiments too soon. But in every case, human determination had collided with something far older and far wiser than humanity itself. The cosmos had set boundaries, and no amount of planning or technology could fully bypass them. The researcher began to reconstruct these missions using fragments of old data. Simulations, logs, and satellite imagery were pieced together, showing the exact paths ships had taken, the anomalies they had encountered, and the moments when communication was lost. It was like reading a story in fragments, each piece revealing the struggle, the wonder, and the fear of the crews. In one mission, a ship drifted near a glowing mass that pulsed with energy. Crew members reported hearing a voice, not through speakers, but in their minds, clear and insistent, warning them to turn back. The captain ignored it, believing it was a stress-induced illusion, but within hours, the ship's navigation system failed, sending it into a slow, spiraling drift toward nothingness. Another mission recorded strange patterns on their instruments, geometric shapes that appeared in the void, perfectly symmetrical and impossible according to known physics. Crew members described seeing structures that seemed alive, shifting as they watched, almost as if the cosmos itself were rearranging reality. One astronaut even reported feeling memories that weren't theirs, moments from a past life, emotions from people they had never met, and images of civilizations that had existed millions of years before humans. These experiences left them shaken, unable to describe fully what had happened. The researcher knew that understanding these events required more than science alone. It required imagination, empathy, and respect for the unknown. Many scientists dismissed the reports, calling them stress responses hallucinations, or psychological breakdowns. But the researcher had a different perspective. They believed that the cosmos was not hostile out of malice, but it had its own rules and history, and it reacted to humans because it remembered them. The universe had memory, and human presence could leave a mark even in the vacuum of space. As the researcher explored these patterns, they began to notice something remarkable. The warnings were consistent across decades, cultures, and missions. No matter who launched the mission, no matter what country or technology was used, the outcomes were eerily similar. Ships failed, instruments malfunctioned, crews reported visions and feelings of being observed. The universe seemed to respond to human curiosity as if it knew the intentions behind every mission. This suggested that the forbidden space was not just a physical location, but a boundary defined by something deeper, a memory, consciousness, or intelligence that humanity could not fully grasp. The researcher also discovered evidence that some missions had come dangerously close to breaching this boundary entirely. In one case, a ship vanished for weeks, only to reappear damaged and with the crew unable to remember what had happened. They spoke in fragmented sentences, describing visions of cities made of light, endless tunnels, and creatures that seemed to exist between dimensions. It was as if they had entered a place outside normal time and space. No human had survived long-term contact without psychological or physical consequences. Despite these dangers, curiosity persisted. Even as governments attempted to downplay the risks, private companies and independent researchers were drawn to the mystery. Rumors of hidden data, secret expeditions, and new technologies circulated among scientific communities. Humanity's natural desire to explore, discover, and conquer remained strong, even when faced with the terrifying lessons of the past. The researcher became increasingly aware of the ethical dimension of this knowledge. Should humanity continue to push into forbidden space? Was curiosity worth the risk of annihilation, or even just of permanent psychological harm to explorers? They began to study not just the technical reports, but also the human stories, the fears, hopes, and bravery of those who had ventured too far. These personal accounts revealed courage beyond imagination, but also a deep vulnerability. Humans were explorers by nature, but they were also fragile in the face of forces far older than themselves. In one of the most striking records, a crew described the moment they realized they were being observed. Instruments had gone silent. The stars around them shimmered unnaturally. Then, without warning, they saw visions of themselves as children, their fears and dreams projected into the void. It was as if the universe were holding up a mirror, showing them who they truly were, and reminding them why they should not proceed. The experience left the crew traumatized, but also awed. They had glimpsed something larger than life, something that had been there long before humans existed, and would remain long after. The researcher began to compile all of this evidence into a single narrative. It was a story of ambition and failure, of curiosity and caution, of humanity's unrelenting desire to explore and the universe's quiet but firm resistance. Each mission, each vision, each lost crew member added weight to the conclusion. Forbidden space was dangerous, not just because of physical hazards, but because of forces that humanity could neither see nor fully understand. These forces remembered humanity. They responded to human intent. And they were patient. As the researcher pieced together the history of forbidden space, a sense of respect grew. Humans had always believed that knowledge and technology could conquer anything. But here was proof that there were limits imposed not just by physics or biology, but by the universe itself. Forbidden space was a reminder that humanity was small, fragile, and part of a much larger story. It was a humbling realization, and one that the researcher hoped others would understand before repeating the mistakes of the past. By the end of this investigation, the researcher had come to an important understanding. the cosmos was not silent, empty, or indifferent. It was alive in ways humans could barely comprehend, and it remembered. Every attempt to cross the forbidden's boundary, every exploration into the unknown, was recorded in the memory of space itself. And the universe, in its infinite patience, had rules for what could and could not be touched. Humanity had been warned again and again, but few had truly listened. In the quiet of the research lab, as the researcher closed the files for the day, a sense of wonder mixed with unease. Humanity had always sought to explore, to discover, to reach beyond the known. But the story of forbidden space was a reminder that exploration came with responsibility. It was not simply about pushing boundaries, but understanding them, respecting them, and recognizing that some mysteries were meant to be approached with caution, not arrogance. The researcher looked up at the night sky, imagining the unseen boundaries, the memories held in the darkness beyond the solar system. Somewhere out there, in the vast stretches of space, the universe waited, remembering. And humanity, for all its ambition, had to decide whether it was ready to listen or whether it would continue to push, risking everything for the sake of curiosity. After studying the records and patterns of past missions, the researcher realized that the only way to truly understand forbidden space was to observe it firsthand. But it was not just any observation. They needed a mission designed with extreme caution, combining the latest technology with human intuition and careful planning. A team was assembled, a small group of astronauts, scientists, and engineers who shared a sense of curiosity and respect for the unknown. They were well aware of the warnings from previous missions, but their drive to explore was stronger than their fear. Preparation for the mission took months. Every system was tested repeatedly, every protocol rehearsed to perfection. Simulations ran continuously, mapping potential hazards and planning for every possible scenario. The team knew that the stakes were higher than any previous expedition. They were not just venturing into uncharted territory, they were entering a region of space that seemed to respond to human presence. Instruments were equipped with redundant systems, communication channels were strengthened, and psychological support was provided to handle the mental strain of prolonged exposure to the unknown. As the day of launch approached, excitement mixed with tension. Friends and family watched, proud but anxious, aware that history had shown the dangers of this endeavor. The team boarded their ship, a sleek, state-of-the-art craft designed for deep space travel. The engines roared to life, and slowly they left the safety of Earth behind, passing the familiar planets and stars they had always known. Outside the windows, the solar system shrank into the distance, replaced by the infinite darkness of interstellar space. From the beginning, the Forbidden's region behaved strangely. Instruments began to record fluctuations in electromagnetic fields and gravitational waves, even at great distances. The team noticed the stars around them shimmering unnaturally, bending in ways that defied physics. Communication with mission control remained stable for now, but the sense of being watched was almost palpable. The team discussed it openly, not dismissing their feelings, but analyzing every signal, every anomaly, carefully and methodically. As the ship approached closer, strange patterns emerged in the void. At first, they appeared as faint lights, subtle distortions in space, almost like distant auroras. Then they began to take on shapes, geometric forms that shifted and glowed, floating in the darkness as if they were structures or machines beyond comprehension. Some crew members felt a tingling sensation in their bodies, as though unseen forces were interacting with them. Instruments began to fail in small ways, readings fluctuating unpredictably, systems overheating without explanation. It became clear the region was active, alive, and aware. Psychological strain became a real challenge. Crew members reported fleeting visions, memories that were not their own, images of civilizations long gone, and emotions that seemed to belong to people they had never met. These experiences were brief at first, like glimpses in a mirror, but became more persistent as the ship moved deeper into the region. Some felt a creeping sense of dread, as if the universe itself were reminding them of humanity's previous mistakes. Others felt awe, a strange reverence for the forces that had existed long before humans arrived. Despite the growing unease, the team pressed forward. They were trained to respond to anomalies, and they approached every new observation with caution and curiosity. The ship's sensors began detecting unusual energy pulses signals that appeared intentional, almost like messages. The pulses were rhythmic, precise, and complex, far beyond any natural cosmic phenomenon the crew had studied. They realized that this was a form of communication, though not one that humans could fully interpret. It was as if the universe itself was acknowledging their presence and issuing subtle warnings. The crew decided to split their attention between observing the anomalies and maintaining the ship's systems. Repairs were constant, adjustments made in real time, and every experiment documented meticulously. As they went further, the anomalies intensified. Space seemed to stretch and contract, light bending in impossible ways. The stars themselves appeared to rearrange, forming patterns that seemed purposeful. Some crew members felt their thoughts echoing in the void, as if the cosmos were reading their intentions and responding in kind. One night, as the ship drifted deeper into the Forbidden region, the most dramatic event occurred. The crew observed a massive glowing structure in the distance, unlike anything they had seen before. It hovered in silence, massive and impossible in scale, with patterns that shifted continuously. The structure seemed alive, not in the sense of biological life, but in the sense of awareness. The crew could feel it watching them, measuring them, remembering them. Every instinct screamed that this was the core of the Forbidden Zone, the center of whatever intelligence or memory had resisted humanity's intrusion for centuries. Some crew members experienced a vision simultaneously. It was not violent or frightening at first, but intensely vivid. They saw images of past missions, ships disappearing, astronauts calling out for help, moments of hope and despair. Then they glimpsed humanity's early history on Earth, the struggle, the ambition, the curiosity that had led them to explore beyond their home planet. The vision seemed to warn them, reminding them of the cost of overreaching. It was as if the cosmos itself was showing them what had been lost and what might be lost again if they ignored its rules. The intensity of the experience left the crew shaken. They held meetings to process what they had witnessed, sharing their thoughts and fears openly. Each member was affected differently, some with fear, others with awe, some with a sense of responsibility to continue the mission carefully. It was clear that human curiosity was powerful, but fragile, and that the universe did not act out of malice, but out of memory and balance. The Forbidden region was a living record, a guardian of secrets humanity was not yet ready to fully understand. As the days passed, the anomalies increased in complexity. Energy pulses became patterns, then sequences resembling a language. Structures in the void shifted, appearing closer or farther away, sometimes impossible to reconcile with their previous observations. Crew members documented everything meticulously, knowing that their observations could be the most important data humanity had ever collected. Yet even with careful study, they understood that full comprehension might be beyond them. The universe had its own rules, and they were outsiders intruding on a space that had existed long before humans. The psychological strain continued. Some crew members experienced recurring visions, moments from their childhood, their fears and fears. Their hopes projected back at them in ways that were intensely personal. Others felt memories that were not theirs, glimpses of lives, civilizations, and events that had no place in their reality. These experiences were unsettling, but the crew supported each other, sharing what they could and keeping detailed logs. It became clear that the Forbidden region interacted with consciousness, responding not just to physical presence, but to thoughts, intentions, and curiosity itself. Despite all these challenges, the crew remained committed to their mission. They knew that history had shown the risks, but they also understood that exploration was fundamental to humanity's nature. Every observation, every recorded anomaly, was a step toward understanding not just the Forbidden region, but the universe itself. And yet, they felt the constant reminder. The universe remembered every attempt to enter, every misstep, and every curiosity that had gone too far. The forbidden space was a mirror, reflecting humanity's ambition, its fears, and its place in the cosmos. The deeper they went, the more it became clear that forbidden space was not simply dangerous. It was a test. It measured intent, caution, and respect. Those who approached with humility and curiosity were allowed glimpses of its secrets, while those who were reckless or arrogant faced consequences, as history had shown. The crew understood that they were part of a long chain of explorers, each leaving traces in the memory of space. Their mission was not just to observe, but to understand the rules of a place that had existed long before humans arrived. In the final days of this leg of their journey, the crew reached the edge of what they could safely explore. Structures shifted, energy pulses intensified, and the sense of awareness grew stronger. They documented everything meticulously, knowing that these observations could guide future explorers. At the same time, they respected the boundaries, recognizing that some mysteries were not theirs to fully control. The Forbidden region was both awe-inspiring and humbling, a reminder that curiosity must be balanced with caution, and that the universe had memories older and deeper than humanity could imagine. As they prepared to turn back toward safer space, the crew reflected on what they had experienced. They had witnessed wonders beyond comprehension, anomalies that defied physics, and a presence that seemed aware, patient, and eternal. They had glimpsed the memory of the cosmos, a record of humanity's ambition and its limits. And they understood that the universe, vast and ancient, still had rules that humans were only beginning to comprehend. The mission's success was not measured in conquest or discovery alone, but in understanding. The Forbidden region had shared its lessons, its warnings, and its awe-inspiring presence. Humanity's curiosity had been tested, and the crew returned with knowledge. As the crew of the mission moved deeper into forbidden space, the sense of the unknown grew stronger. The darkness beyond the familiar stars seemed to hum with energy, and subtle shifts in light made the region feel alive, almost aware of their presence. It was unlike anything the team had ever experienced, and even the most experienced astronauts were in awe. Every instrument, every sensor, every observation hinted at something far older and far wiser than humanity. The forbidden space was no longer just a danger. It was becoming a teacher, showing them the boundaries and rules of the universe in ways they had never imagined. One day, while drifting carefully near an area of dense anomalies, the crew detected shapes in the void that did not resemble natural formations. At first, they appeared as shimmering clouds of energy, moving unpredictably. But as the ship's sensors focused, the shapes began to take form: geometric, precise, almost architectural. They looked like structures, floating without support, massive and complex, stretching far beyond the scale of any human construction. Some sections glowed with soft light, while others were dark and shadowy, creating contrasts that seemed deliberate, purposeful. The crew felt both fear and fascination. These were not mere accidents of nature. They were artifacts of intelligence, evidence that something had existed here long before humanity. The presence of these structures had an unexpected effect on the crew. Instruments began to record readings that defied logic. Gravity fluctuated in strange ways, Magnetic fields twisted unpredictably, and the ship's navigation system produced results that could not be explained by physics as humans understood it. Even more unsettling were the psychological effects. Crew members reported visions of beings that were neither human nor entirely physical, glimpses of civilizations that had existed millions of years before, and feelings of being observed by something that transcended life itself. Each vision lasted only moments, but left a lasting impression, making the crew question their understanding of reality. As they studied the floating structures, they realized these formations were more than just ruins. They seemed to interact with consciousness itself. Every thought, emotion, and intention from the crew appeared to ripple through the space, subtly influencing the shapes and lights around them. It was as if the structures were alive in a way humans could not fully comprehend, responding to curiosity, fear, and wonder alike. One crew member described it as looking into a mirror that reflected not their physical self, but the essence of their mind, revealing memories, intentions, and even regrets. The experience brought mixed emotions. Awe dominated, but fear lingered. The team understood that this place had survived for eons, and it had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Humanity was new, fragile, and still learning. The universe had memory, and this memory was vast, patient, and observant. Every movement, every thought, and every choice of the crew seemed recorded in the echoes of the void. For the first time, the astronauts truly grasped that forbidden space was not a random danger, but a deliberate boundary maintained by forces far beyond their understanding. Curiosity, however, remained strong. The crew attempted to approach one of the larger structures, hoping to scan it for more information. As they drew near, they saw patterns moving across its surface, lights arranging themselves in sequences that appeared intentional. Crew members felt a strange pull, as though the structure was communicating with them, not in words, but in sensations, images, and emotions. Some felt a calm reassurance, others a subtle warning. It was as though the universe were giving them a choice: observe with respect, or risk consequences by pressing too far. The team carefully documented their findings, taking photographs, mapping the structures, and recording readings. Every anomaly, every pulse of energy, every visual impression was captured with meticulous care. They realized that this mission was unlike any other in human history. Past missions had ended in tragedy because they had approached forbidden space without understanding its rules. This time, the team moved with caution, aware that the universe was both teacher and judge. As they continued, they discovered evidence that these structures were not just isolated formations. They formed vast networks, stretching across light years, connected in ways that suggested communication, storage of information, or even the preservation of history. The crew speculated that these might be remnants of an ancient intelligence, perhaps long extinct, or of a civilization so advanced that its technology was indistinguishable from the fabric of the universe itself. Whatever it was, it had left a record, a memory encoded in the structures and the space around them. The psychological impact on the crew increased as the mission progressed. Some began to experience shared visions, where each member saw the same sequences of events, histories, and memories simultaneously. These visions were vivid and detailed: civilizations rising and falling, ships lost in the void, explorers venturing too far and facing consequences. The crew began to understand that the cosmos did not forget. It held records, lessons, and warnings for those who dared to enter. These experiences were humbling, showing humanity its place in the grand timeline of the universe. One particularly striking moment occurred when the crew approached what appeared to be the central structure of the network. Unlike the others, this formation pulsed with energy that felt alive, almost sentient. It seemed aware of the crew's presence in a direct, personal way. The astronauts felt their thoughts and emotions reflected back at them, amplified and clarified. They experienced visions not just of past missions, but of their own memories, fears, and ambitions. It was as if the universe were reminding them of who they were, why they were here, and what their choices could mean. The team realized that forbidden space functioned as both guardian and teacher. It preserved knowledge, history, and memory, but it also tested those who entered. Curiosity and courage were essential, but arrogance or recklessness could be fatal. The crew understood that the universe's awareness was not malicious, but deliberate, maintaining boundaries and ensuring that those who entered did so with understanding and respect. Humanity had the potential to learn, but it had to approach with humility. As the mission continued, they discovered more subtle interactions between the structures and consciousness. Simple intentions, like curiosity or observation, produced gentle responses, shifting lights, patterns, and sequences. Stronger emotions, like fear or aggression, triggered warnings, instruments failing, sudden energy pulses, and visions that were difficult to endure. The crew learned to manage their emotions, to observe carefully, and to respect the limits imposed by the region. It became clear that the universe could sense not just presence, but the quality of thought, attention, and respect. One night, while the ship hovered near the largest formation, the crew experienced a profound vision. They saw the story of humanity's previous incursions into forbidden space, missions lost, explorers traumatized, and the subtle but consistent warnings the universe had issued. They witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations in the same region, structures forming and decaying over millions of years, all recorded in the memory of the void. The vision conveyed both the fragility of life and the persistence of knowledge. Humanity was small, but capable of understanding and respect if it listened carefully. The crew's understanding of forbidden space deepened with every observation. They realized that the universe's memory was not passive, it was interactive. It could respond, warn, teach, and even guide, but only if approached with humility. Every choice mattered, every thought left an imprint, and every action could ripple through the void. This realization transformed the mission from a simple exploration into a profound study of existence, consciousness, and humanity's role in the cosmos. By the time the crew prepared to leave the region for the first time, they were profoundly changed. They had seen ruins that defied explanation, structures that interacted with thought, and evidence that the universe remembered every human step. They understood that forbidden space was both dangerous and instructive, of the place where humanity's curiosity could lead to discovery or disaster, depending on approach and intent. The lessons were clear. Respect the unknown, approach cautiously, and recognize that the cosmos has a memory far older than any human. As the ship turned back toward known space, the crew reflected on their experiences. They had ventured into a region that had resisted human exploration for centuries and returned with understanding. They had witnessed the memory of the universe, the remnants of civilizations, and the silent intelligence that maintained the boundaries of forbidden space. And they knew that the mission was only the beginning. Humanity had much to learn, but now, for the first time, there was hope that future explorers could do so with respect, understanding, and caution. Forbidden space remained a mystery, vast and incomprehensible, but the crew had glimpsed its lessons. They had experienced firsthand that curiosity must be tempered with humility, and that the universe, in its infinite patience, remembers all who enter. The mission's success was not in conquest, but in comprehension. Humanity had touched the edge of the unknown and learned that some mysteries demand reverence, not control, and that the cosmos itself can teach, warn, and guide those who are willing to listen. The crew had already witnessed wonders beyond imagination, yet as they ventured deeper into forbidden space, they began to feel the true weight of its power. The structures, The lights, the strange pulses of energy, they were no longer simply curiosities to observe. The regions seemed to respond more intensely to their presence, testing their limits in ways that were both subtle and terrifying. Instruments that had functioned flawlessly before began to fail unpredictably. Power surges damaged critical systems, and navigation became almost impossible as gravitational anomalies distorted the ship's course. It was clear that the universe was no longer simply watching, they were being tested, even though they had trained for extreme conditions. The psychological toll on the crew became apparent. Sleep cycles were disrupted by visions that seemed to occur even when their eyes were closed. Some crew members experienced fleeting flashes of past failures, imagining ships lost, colleagues who had disappeared, and the weight of humanity's repeated mistakes. Other visions were stranger, showing civilizations rising and falling, vast networks of intelligence, and forces that had existed long before humans. These experiences were not nightmares. They were memories of the universe itself, reflected back in a way that left the crew both awed and terrified. One crew member, who had previously been the most cautious, grew obsessed with trying to understand the phenomena. They wanted to decode the energy pulses, map the shifting structures, and find patterns in the visions. Despite repeated warnings from colleagues, they pushed forward, driven by curiosity and ambition. Others in the crew felt uneasy, sensing that the balance of respect and caution was being disrupted. Forbidden space had allowed them glimpses of its secrets because they had approached carefully. But now, one person's impatience threatened to upset the fragile understanding that had been built as the ship moved closer to a massive, pulsating formation. The consequences of pushing too far became clear. The energy readings intensified rapidly, causing the ship's systems to fail in succession. Lights flickered, instruments went dark, and life support warnings began to sound. The crew scrambled to stabilize the ship, but nothing worked as expected. The structure seemed to respond directly to their actions, shifting, pulsing, and even creating gravitational distortions that pushed the ship off course. For the first time, the crew realized that forbidden space could not be negotiated with technology alone. It required respect, patience, and understanding. Suddenly, a powerful pulse of energy surged through the ship. It was not destructive in the sense of an explosion, but it was overwhelming. Crew members felt it in their bodies, minds, and even emotions. It was as if the universe were pressing against them, testing their intentions, their courage, and their respect for the unknown. One crew member screamed as visions of past explorers flashed before them, ships torn apart, missions failed, lives lost. Others felt waves of understanding, glimpses of civilizations, and the knowledge that forbidden space was not simply a physical region, but a living memory, a record of all who had dared to enter. The ship was damaged severely. Systems failed, power was unstable, and navigation was nearly impossible. The crew faced a stark choice: continue to push forward, risking complete destruction, or retreat and live to tell the story. Tension ran high, arguments broke out, and fear threatened to overtake reason. The universe, it seemed, was patient but persistent, responding to every hesitation, every misstep, every act of pride or defiance. The lesson was clear. Curiosity could lead to discovery, but arrogance could lead to annihilation. As they struggled to regain control, the crew noticed subtle changes in the visions they were experiencing. The images were no longer random or disconnected. They formed sequences, almost like warnings or guidance. Ships lost in the past were shown with their mistakes highlighted. The choices that had led to disaster were replayed in slow motion, almost as if forbidden space itself wanted the crew to understand and learn. It was a harsh lesson in the cost of curiosity, but also a gift, a chance to observe, correct, and survive where others had failed, despite the danger. One crew member insisted on continuing the investigation. convinced that knowledge outweighed the risk. They attempted to maneuver closer to the central structure, hoping to capture data that no human had ever recorded. This decision triggered a dramatic response. The energy pulses intensified, shaking the ship violently. Gravity distorted suddenly, throwing crew members off balance and damaging sensitive equipment. Warnings blared continuously as systems struggled to compensate. It became clear that forbidden space was no longer giving gentle hints. It was enforcing its rules. In a desperate attempt to save the mission, the team worked together to stabilize the ship. They shut down non-essential systems, redirected power to life support, and carefully maneuvered away from the structure. The closer they had come, the more dangerous the space had become. It was as if the universe had remembered every human intrusion and was now responding with the full weight of its memory. Crew members were exhausted, emotionally drained, and shaken, yet alive. They had learned firsthand the true cost of pushing too far without understanding. Once they had moved to a safer distance, the crew assessed the damage. The ship was functional, but barely stable. Some instruments were destroyed, others permanently altered by the intense energy fields. Crew members who had been most exposed to the visions were disoriented and emotionally fragile. Despite the fear and exhaustion, there was a sense of relief. They had survived an experience that had destroyed missions in the past. But the lesson was indelible. Forbidden space was not to be taken lightly. It demanded respect, patience, and caution, and it remembered every act of human curiosity. The team decided to document everything meticulously. They recorded every anomaly, every energy pulse, every vision, and every decision made in the crisis. They knew that future explorers could benefit from their experience, but also that humanity's relationship with forbidden space was not one of conquest. It was one of learning, humility, and understanding. The universe had allowed them glimpses, tests, and warnings, and it had given them a chance to survive and reflect as they prepared to retreat further. The crew discussed the implications of their journey. Forbidden space was alive, aware, and patient. It was a place where curiosity could lead to discovery, but only if tempered by humility. The memories of the universe, encoded in energy, structures, and visions, were a record of every human mistake, every triumph, and every attempt to cross boundaries prematurely. The crew realized that the cosmos was teaching them something profound. Human ambition was not enough. Respect, understanding, and caution were essential. The return journey was slow and careful. The crew avoided areas of intense energy, navigated around shifting structures, and remained vigilant for any signs of the universe's memory responding. Though they were moving away from the central structures, the lessons continued to unfold. Even in the quieter regions, visions flickered briefly. Energy pulses responded to emotions, and the sense of awareness remained. The crew understood that their forbidden space was not simply a location. It was a living, remembering part of the cosmos, interacting with humanity in ways that could not be ignored or underestimated. By the time the ship reached safer territory, the crew had experienced a profound transformation. They had survived an encounter with the memory of the universe itself, witnessed structures of ancient intelligence, and learned firsthand the consequences of pushing too far. They had seen that curiosity without respect could bring devastation, but that careful observation and humility could allow insight and understanding. Humanity had been tested, and while the cost had been high, the lessons were invaluable. The crew knew that their journey was only the beginning. Forbidden space would continue to exist, vast, mysterious, and alive, challenging every future explorer who dared to approach. But they had glimpsed a new way of understanding the universe, not as a place to conquer, but as a partner, teacher, and judge. They had felt the consequences of curiosity, the weight of memory, and the importance of respect. And they knew that this understanding could guide humanity safely into the stars, if only they remembered the lessons they had learned the mission ended with a sense of cautious hope. The crew had faced the full intensity of forbidden space, survived, and returned with knowledge that few humans had ever known. They had seen the price of curiosity firsthand, and they understood that the universe, patient and ancient, had rules that could not be ignored. Humanity was small, fragile, and ambitious, but with respect, humility, and careful observation, it could navigate even the most dangerous regions of the cosmos. As the ship finally moved away from the central structures of forbidden space, the crew felt a profound mixture of relief, awe, and humility. The darkness behind them was no longer just empty void. It was alive with memory, intelligence, and warning. Every pulse of light, every shifting formation, had spoken a lesson that went beyond science or technology. It had spoken directly to them, teaching about respect, patience, and the limits of human ambition. For the first time, the crew truly understood that forbidden space was not simply a region to explore. It was a guardian of knowledge, ancient and eternal. The journey back to familiar space was slow and cautious. The crew had learned to navigate by observing patterns rather than relying solely on instruments, which had proven unreliable in the forbidden region. They spoke constantly, sharing their thoughts, experiences, and reflections. Each crew member carried a mixture of fear and wonder. Some were haunted by visions that lingered in their minds, images of past explorers and ancient civilizations replaying in fragments. Others felt a strange sense of connection, as if the universe itself had briefly acknowledged them and allowed them a glimpse of its vast memory. Despite their relief at leaving the most dangerous areas behind, the crew knew that the lessons of forbidden space would not leave them so easily. Even now, far from the central structures, they noticed subtle anomalies, fluctuations in energy, brief distortions in light, and moments where their thoughts seemed mirrored back to them in strange ways. These reminders were quiet but persistent. The universe was patient. It did not punish recklessly, but it remembered everything, waiting for humanity to learn and respect its rules. As the days passed, the crew began to process what they had experienced more fully. They reviewed their records, logs, and observations in detail. Every piece of data, every anomaly, every vision was examined carefully. They realized that the forbidden region was not just dangerous. It was alive in a way that transcended physical understanding. It responded not just to their presence, but to their intentions, their curiosity, and their respect. The memories of past explorers, the ruins of ancient civilizations, and the pulses of energy are all part of a vast record, a living history that humanity had been allowed to witness. The crew reflected on the lessons humanity had ignored for centuries. Past missions had failed because ambition and curiosity had outpaced understanding and respect. Ships had been lost, crews traumatized, and knowledge erased or hidden. But now, with careful observation and humility, the crew had glimpsed the deeper truth. Forbidden space was not an enemy, but a teacher. It offered insight and guidance to those willing to approach with caution and reverence. The universe had set boundaries, and it responded to the quality of human thought, not just physical presence. As they moved further toward safety, the crew noticed the first signs of the universe easing its intensity. Energy pulses became steadier, visions less intrusive, and the anomalies began to stabilize. The central structures of forbidden space remained in their distance, glowing faintly, but no longer exerting the overwhelming presence that had challenged them. It was a sign that the crew had passed the final test. They had observed, respected, and survived. They had learned the rules of engagement with a region of space that had tested humanity's curiosity for centuries. Even in their relief, the crew felt a sense of responsibility. They had returned with knowledge that could benefit future explorers, but they also understood the importance of sharing the lessons cautiously. Forbidden space was not something to be exploited or conquered. Its memory, intelligence, and awareness required respect, humility, and careful study. The crew documented everything meticulously, not only for scientific purposes, but also as guidance for humanity's future interactions with the unknown. During the journey back, conversations among the crew often turned philosophical. They discussed the nature of the universe, the meaning of memory in a region so vast, and the responsibility of humans as explorers. Some reflected on the courage of past missions, the mistakes that had been made, and the lessons learned too late. Others spoke about the delicate balance between curiosity and caution, ambition and respect. Each conversation reinforced a growing understanding. Humanity's survival and progress depended not just on technology, but on wisdom, empathy, and humility. The psychological effects of forbidden space lingered. Crew members continued to experience subtle glimpses of civilizations long gone, fragments of energy patterns, and flashes of past explorers. These were not frightening anymore. Instead, they felt like quiet reminders. The universe remembered, and it was patient. Humans had been given a chance to witness, learn, and reflect. The crew felt privileged to have survived and returned with this knowledge, understanding that their mission was both a record of discovery and a warning for the future. As they approached the edge of familiar space, the crew could finally see stars and planets they recognized. The sun's light, planets with familiar colors, and the comforting patterns of the known universe brought a deep sense of relief. Yet the experience had changed them. The night sky no longer felt like a distant mystery. It felt like a living, remembering presence. Each star was a witness, each shadow a memory. And humanity's ambition now had a new dimension: the need to approach exploration with care, respect, and understanding. Upon returning to Earth's orbit, the crew prepared to share their findings with the scientific community. They knew that not everyone would understand or accept the full truth, but their records were clear. Forbidden space was a living memory, a conscious boundary, and a region of incredible power. It was not meant to be conquered, but to be studied and respected. Humanity had been allowed glimpses of its secrets, and with that privilege came responsibility. The team's debriefings were extensive. Scientists, engineers, and historians studied the logs, energy readings, and images captured during the mission. They were astonished by the evidence of structures, energy patterns, and consciousness that interacted with the crew. The accounts of visions and memory interactions sparked debates about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the universe itself. Forbidden space had challenged not just the limits of technology, but the limits of human understanding. One of the most important lessons became clear: humanity could not approach exploration with arrogance. The universe, patient and ancient, would respond to intent, respect, and curiosity. Those who ignored the warnings faced consequences. Those who approached with humility and careful observation were rewarded with understanding and survival. Forbidden space was not merely a location. It was a test of humanity's wisdom, patience, and courage. The crew's experience also sparked a shift in how future missions would be planned. Space agencies and private explorers began to consider the psychological, ethical, and philosophical dimensions of deep space exploration. Technology alone was not enough. The universe demanded respect, and understanding the rules of engagement with regions like forbidden space became essential. Humanity's ambition would continue, but now with a deeper awareness of the memory and intelligence that existed beyond. Earth. The lessons of forbidden space extended beyond science. They touched the human spirit. Crew members realized that exploration was not only about reaching new destinations, but also about understanding oneself, one's intentions, and one's place in the universe. The visions, energy pulses, and structures had all served as mirrors, reflecting humanity's strengths and weaknesses. The universe remembered, and it had shown that knowledge without respect could be dangerous. But curiosity balanced with humility could be transformative. In the months after their return, the crew shared their experiences with a broader audience, carefully framing the story in human terms. They emphasized the importance of respect, understanding, and careful observation. Forbidden space was no longer just a distant mystery. It had become a symbol of humanity's potential and limitations. The mission had proven that humans could survive and learn from the unknown, but only if they approached it with wisdom and patience. As the crew looked back on their journey, they realized how fragile humanity was in the face of forces far older and larger than themselves. Yet they also recognized the resilience, courage, and ingenuity of those who dared to explore. Forbidden space had tested them in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and in return, it had offered lessons that could guide humanity for generations. The universe, patient and remembering, had allowed them a glimpse of its memory, and they had returned with knowledge that could change the way humans approached the cosmos. The final reflection of the mission was clear. Forbidden space was a teacher, a guardian, and a mirror. It held memory, intelligence, and history that humanity could not fully comprehend, but it responded to respect, curiosity, and humility. The cosmos remembered humanity's every action, and it had shown that exploration required more than courage. It required wisdom. The crew had survived, learned, and returned, carrying the legacy of their experience as a guide for all future explorers. And so, humanity had glimpsed the memory of the universe. Forbidden space remained vast, mysterious, and alive. It would continue to challenge, test, and teach those who dared to approach. But the lessons were clear. Curiosity must be balanced with respect, ambition with hum,